What is the most difficult part about language learning? Leave a comment down below with your opinion or with your experience before watching the video. Today I'm recording with a new camera and with a new microphone, and I would like to thank my Patreons because it's thanks to you that I can afford to change my settings and things like that. For sure I will need to play with the settings, so maybe it's not perfect yet. And as you know, I moved to a new apartment recently, so it's still a little bit empty, so I hope still that you can hear me and see me well. So, what do I think are the most difficult parts of language learning? We're going to see two articles, and I'm gonna just comment on what they consider are the most difficult parts. And yeah, if you're ready, let's get started. So we're gonna use two articles, and I'm just gonna link them down below, and we're gonna see what they consider the most difficult part of language learning. And I'm just gonna react to it. Of course, we don't always have to agree, so maybe you consider something else difficult, so just leave a comment down below and that's fine. So the first one in this article at elearninginsight.com is missing in listening. I think this is a big one. I think because people just go to school, learn a language, and then they feel like, I learned it at school, I have an official level of B2, but I still somehow struggle to communicate. And I think if you listen to a lot of input, comprehensible input, as you know, it will work out better for you. And if you make like a habit out of it and you combine it with things that you do daily, it doesn't have to be a struggle. It doesn't have to be like 2 hours every day. It can just be like 15 minutes while preparing your breakfast. And I think it's very doable, and it will help you, I think. Then the second one is proper pronunciation and tone. Well, I mean, there are languages for which tone is extremely important, and I have never, for instance, studied Chinese, but I've heard like getting the tone right is extremely important. So I could imagine this is a big challenge. And I think this is also a mindset thing, right? If you think, well, I'm never ever going to be able to get the tones right, and then you start like that, then it's like you set up yourself for failure. I'm not saying it's not difficult, I'm sure it is, but I think there's a big part, which is mindset, that plays a big role there too. I feel like with pronunciation, as long as you can communicate, I think that's good enough. But I know that if you feel like you have a bad pronunciation, then you will speak less, so you will practice less. You will be less exposed to the language maybe as well, because you'll feel like, well, I'm bad anyway. So in that regard, pronunciation is important, and I think some people do struggle with it. Struggling with grammar. I think this is a big deal for a lot of people. I think it doesn't have to be necessarily like, for instance, my Russian, I speak with very bad grammar. I'm not proud of it. I know it's not a thing to be proud of, but what I'm here to say is you don't have to have perfect grammar to be able to communicate, and it will just depend on the situation. Where do you need your language, and does it have to be perfect, right? And for instance, my English is not perfect, my German is not perfect, and I work in these languages. So I think, well, it can be an issue, but you shouldn't get obsessed with it. That's my take. The following one is incorrect semantic usage. Of course, there are words that, for instance, are used in a certain context, for instance, in Spanish, but maybe not in English. And then if you kind of mix them up, yeah, you can create like weird situations. Maybe you are understood, but it's not like the way a native would say it. But for me, this is not such a big deal. Like, maybe you use a word in a situation that you're not supposed to use, and maybe it's funny, then you laugh at it, and then you try to remember it. But I don't think it's like the most difficult part of language learning. The fifth one is slow listening comprehension. This is a very important topic to a lot of people, I think. Like, they feel like they can follow very slow videos or, you know, easy content, but then when it just gets faster, they struggle. And I think, well, like everything, a way to deal with that is to get lots of exposure and to adapt the material you're listening to your needs. If you're at a B1 and you're listening to A1 material, you probably won't make much progress and you will still struggle with more advanced material. So just be aware of your level and kind of think about, well, what could I do to make it a little bit more challenging, so that you kind of get used to the higher level. But I think you need lots of input and you need to just pay attention to things that you're interested in and that you feel that will take you further. Yeah. So this was the first list. The second list is more about mindset, I think, because the first one is, well, you doubt about your abilities. This is something we briefly talked about. Self-confidence is very important for language learning and for learning anything, because you will make mistakes and you will make a fool out of yourself, and you just need to accept that. And yeah, your abilities are not perfect, but you shouldn't be paralyzed by that fact, because that's like everyone's case, right? Like, you're not alone at not being perfect. So I think this can be a big difficulty. The second one is lack of practice opportunities. I think nowadays, in a globalized world, everyone, or not everyone, but most people has access to internet, and there are a ton of possibilities to practice. So, but we just need to know about them. Sometimes we just don't know. Like when I was growing up, I didn't know what a tandem was, what a pen pal was. And I didn't know, of course, there are many things that didn't exist back then, but there are many possibilities. We just need to be aware of them. And for instance, if you say, well, I live in a little town somewhere, I don't know, there's no person to whom I can talk to in Swedish. Well, there's the internet, and there are websites where you can even find other people to talk to for free. And there are others where you maybe need to pay. But some years ago, it was impossible for me, like in the town where I came from, I would have never found a teacher of Swedish. Never. I think it was nearly impossible. And right now I can just Google and find a teacher in Swedish. So I think the lack of practice opportunities is not as big of a problem as it used to be. But of course there are like minority languages maybe where it's still an issue, but still like there's more material than ever before. So I don't think that's the biggest difficulty for language learning. The third one is fear of speaking with strangers. I made a video about how to start talking more. I think this is a big topic, but if you are afraid of speaking to strangers, then just start slowly. Like, don't start by speaking to a big group of people you don't know. Start talking to yourself when you're at home. You can record a video and talk about whatever you want to talk to that person later or whatever, or you can just look for a friend to talk to or a tandem. So it's not just like a bunch of strangers, it's just one person. That person's also learning a language like you're doing, so it's kind of more, encouraging, and so you don't have to face that fear straight away. You can just build up with these techniques. Yeah. Loss of motivation is number 4. I guess you gotta have some sort of a goal, and some sort of why. Why are you learning that language? And kind of where do you want to get, and how are you going to get there? And I think loss of motivation can be due to many things. Maybe you don't find the time, or maybe you feel stuck, like you're not making any progress. And I think you just need to see where you're at and why, and try to turn it around by using short-term goals and long-term goals. I think this is a great way to gain motivation. And at the end of the day, if you have good habits, you don't even need motivation, because if you integrate language learning in your daily life, you're not dependent on motivation. It's like if you want to exercise, most people don't always feel like it, but if you have your habit to do it every second day, then you just do it. You don't need to wait for the motivation to come. Your habit just kind of takes over, right? Having motivation still, I think, very important, because it just well, it's not just studying or not just spending time with languages, it's how you do it. The motivation, you know, it will make it more intense, you will have more fun. It's, of course, it is very important. So I think just combining both is super important. And the last one of this list is expecting it to be easy. Yeah, I mean, I'm not the one to tell you learn a language in a week, learn a language in a month. You can learn something in that amount of time. It's not like useless, because a year is made up of days and made up of weeks and made up of months. And you can definitely learn something quick, but not a language. You will learn a certain type of skill in that language maybe, and that's okay. That just will keep building up. But if you expect it to happen overnight, then you will be disappointed, really, because it won't happen overnight. So yeah, these are some topics we've talked about. What's the most difficult thing in language learning in your eyes? What do you think? What I've personally struggled the most being a polyglot is finding the time for all the languages, and then at some point you just need to accept, that's my perspective anyway, that you need to prioritize. So which are the languages you want to spend more time on, and maybe which are the languages which will need to be kind of parked somewhere, and maybe you'll take over again sometime in the future, or you just keep them a little bit lower than you would like to, like at a lower level than you would like to, and that's okay. Yeah, I mean, that is what I personally struggle with, lobbying a language and not having the time for it, because I know that there are other languages I need to give more priority to. It is what it is. I've come to accept this, and I mean, life changes a lot, so maybe later on I'll have more time for that one language, or maybe even for a new language. So that is what I personally struggle with. I would love to know what you struggle with. Please leave me a comment down below. Leave me a like if you liked it. You can subscribe, and you can become a patron so that I can upgrade my equipment even more. No, or also maybe, yeah, other things. I mean, if you're a patron, you also have access to my Catalan podcast transcripts, so, and my eternal gratitude. So that's something, I guess. And I was really glad to see you, and hope to see you very soon. Bye bye.